Marcus Hale felt the sting before the officer even opened his mouth. The lecture hall doors hissed shut behind him as he stepped into the evening air, briefcase in hand, the campus quiet except for the hum of streetlights. He'd taken 3 steps toward his car when the cruiser rolled up fast, tires cracking over gravel, spotlight snapping onto him with surgical precision. The beam pinned him in place. Heat pulsed under his collar. Officer Trent climbed out slowly, one hand on his belt, the other tapping the flashlight against his palm as if testing its weight. The campus quad, normally open, safe, familiar, felt suddenly carved into hostile angles. Marcus raised a hand. Is something wrong? Trent's boot stopped inches from him. The officer's breath smelled sharp, metallic. His eyes swept Marcus's face, coat, briefcase. Then came the line, hard, casual, meant to brand. You people wander around here like you belong. But you don't fool me. Uneducated. Out of place. The words struck deeper than the spotlight. Marcus felt everything around him, as if the night itself had narrowed. His pulse climbed, but he kept his voice steady, the way he taught his students during tense debates. I teach here, he said. Step aside. Trent smirked. Sure you do. A second cruiser rolled in. Doors opened. Footsteps multiplied. Marcus's hand tightened on his briefcase. Something cold slid through his stomach. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a setup, public, deliberate, escalating. And as Trent reached for his radio, Marcus realized the next minute would determine everything. Marcus stepped off the curb, the night air sharp against his face, the briefcase heavy in his hand from a full day of lectures, meetings, and a late seminar that had run 20 minutes over time. He wanted only to go home, eat something simple, and let the silence of his apartment settle his thoughts. Instead, a sudden flash of white light cut across the parking lot, freezing him mid-stride like a pinned specimen beneath glass. The cruiser's spotlight locked onto him with clinical precision. Boots hit pavement. A door slammed. Officer Trent walked into the beam's edge, one hand resting on his belt, the other on a flashlight already rattling against his palm. The sound carried like an accusation. Stop right there. Marcus halted. He knew that tone. He had heard variations of it applied to others. I work here, he said, heading to my car. Trent circled him slowly, eyes scanning coat, shoes, briefcase, face. Funny, he said. Didn't ask for your schedule. 2 officers emerged from the second cruiser. Their movements were practiced, synchronized, designed to fill angles, close exits, create pressure. One stood behind Marcus. The other flanked his left. Trent stayed directly in front. Marcus's pulse tightened. What is the issue? Saw you walking between buildings, Trent said. Looked suspicious. I walked out of a lecture hall. Trent's lip twitched. Don't talk back. Hands where I can see them. Marcus raised them slowly, briefcase dangling from his fingers. You're making a mistake. Trent stepped closer. Or maybe I'm reading the situation right. Uncooperative. Evasive. I answered your question. Not to my satisfaction. The second officer shifted. Want me to check him? Trent nodded. Bag first. Marcus held the briefcase close. There's nothing illegal in it. Trent reached for it. Marcus stepped back. The officers tensed. I am a faculty member, Marcus said. This is university property. You have no cause. You don't tell me what I have cause for. Trent's voice sharpened, a blade sliding out of its sheath. Set it down. Marcus looked at the empty walkway, the dim buildings, the rows of parked cars gleaming under the streetlights. No witnesses. No audience. The isolation gave Trent confidence. I'm not setting it down, Marcus said. Trent stepped closer. You're refusing a lawful order. It isn't lawful. A beat. A silent, dangerous beat. Trent turned to the others. Cuff him. Marcus's breath locked. You're detaining me for walking to my car. For refusing to comply. He forced steadiness into his voice. I teach constitutional law. Trent's smirk cut across the beam. Sure you do. The officers moved. One reached for Marcus's arm. Marcus pulled it away, not violently, instinctively. That was enough. Trent lunged, grabbing Marcus's wrist, twisting it sharply. Pain shot up his forearm. "This is unnecessary," Marcus said through clenched teeth. "You people always think you know better." The phrase dropped like a weight. Marcus inhaled slowly. "This is unlawful," he said. "You know it." Trent's grip tightened. The other officers closed in. Their shadows folded over him, merging into a single advancing wall. And Marcus understood the moment had already tipped. The next action would define everything that followed. He braced himself as the lights brightened, boots shifting, hands reaching. Then the world narrowed to a single breath, and the officers moved in. Marcus sat on the low concrete step outside the precinct, his wrists still burning where the cuffs had been. They had released him with stiff, bureaucratic indifference, no apology, no explanation, only a copy of a field interaction report filled with distortions. The street lamps hummed overhead. A cold wind scraped across his face. He felt hollow, as if part of him had been scraped away during the 2 hours he'd spent inside answering questions that had nothing to do with truth. A student approached timidly from across the sidewalk. "Professor Hale, I saw what happened." "They—" Marcus lifted a hand. "Not now." The student nodded and retreated, glancing back twice before disappearing into the dark. Marcus scanned the report again. Suspicious movement. Refused lawful instruction. Agitated demeanor. Each phrase was carefully structured to justify force, not to describe reality. He folded the paper slowly, slid it into his coat, and walked toward campus. His phone buzzed nonstop. Messages, missed calls, notifications piling into chaos. He ignored all of them until one name appeared. Dean Lewiston. He answered. "Yes." "Marcus," the dean said, voice low and strained. "I just received word about an incident. We need to meet first thing in the morning." There was no incident. There was misconduct. A silence. Paper shuffle. A deliberate inhale. "Let's discuss in person." Marcus hung up without responding. As he crossed the quad, a cluster of students near the fountain stared at their phones. One lifted the device slightly. Marcus recognized the paused frame of his detainment. Someone had recorded everything. He slowed. The students fell silent, watching him with a mixture of anger, guilt, and fear. One stepped forward. "We're sorry, Professor. We should have." "You recorded it?" Marcus asked. "Yes." "Then you did something." He walked on. By the time he reached his office building, 3 emails from the administration had arrived. Campus safety clarification, incident review pending, and request for faculty cooperation. Each one framed the event as a misunderstanding requiring restraint. Each one urged minimal discussion. His department chair, Professor Estelle Ruiz, stood outside his office door the moment he arrived. "I heard," she said. "Come inside." He followed her. She shut the door and locked it, a gesture that revealed more fear than comfort. "Are you all right?" she asked. "No." Ruiz nodded. "There's already pressure from above. They want to keep things quiet. They think this will damage the university image." Marcus leaned against the desk. The university image is damaged because a police officer profiled a faculty member on its property. They don't see it that way. I don't intend to soften anything for them. Ruiz paced. "I'll support you, but they'll push back. Hard." Marcus spoke evenly. "I have evidence." She stopped pacing. "What kind?" "Video. Multiple angles. By the look of it." Relief flickered across her face. "Good. Keep copies off campus." "I already backed them up." At home that night, Marcus sat at his dining table, documents spread out, the false report, the student video circulating online, timestamps from his lecture notes, security camera locations he planned to request under university policy. His phone vibrated again. A text from an unknown number. Drop it. Move on. Don't ruin a good man's career. He deleted it without expression. Another message appeared seconds later. "People like you always escalate things." He muted the number and continued cataloging evidence. He analyzed the video frame by frame. Trent's posture, the smirk, the unnecessary proximity, the wrist twist, the lack of any articulated cause. the 2 secondary officers flanking him. It was textbook escalation, intentional, tactical, unprovoked. Marcus labeled each file, saved duplicates, encrypted them. Near midnight, he drafted a concise account of the incident, stripped of emotion, documented in legal order: time, location, behavior, commands, responses, physical contact, release. He wrote it for himself first, a foundation no one could erode. The next morning, the administrative meeting unfolded exactly as expected. Dean Lewiston sat at the polished table, hands clasped theatrically. "Marcus," he began, "we all regret what happened last night, but it's important we present a unified, measured narrative to prevent misinformation." Marcus held eye contact. The officer acted without cause. Lewiston gave a mild frown. "I'm sure there are differing interpretations." "There aren't." Campus counsel, a thin man with a carefully neutral expression, cleared his throat. "We advise refraining from speaking with students or media until our internal assessment concludes." "No," Lewiston blinked. "I'm sorry." "No," Marcus repeated. "I won't hide a civil rights violation because it inconveniences the university." Counsel shifted papers. "This could become highly public. That may not be in your professional interest." Marcus leaned forward. "My professional interest is truth. I'm not ashamed of being targeted. They should be ashamed of doing it." A long pause. Lewiston exhaled slowly. "Then we will proceed with formal review." "Against him or against me?" Marcus asked. Another pause. "We're evaluating all angles." Marcus stood. "Do that." He left the room without seeking permission. Hours later, the first student video hit 10,000 views. Comments swarmed, some furious, some dismissive, many coded with quiet hostility. He must have done something. Why didn't he just comply? These professors are always dramatic. Marcus read only enough to understand the tone, then closed his laptop. He refused to absorb poison, but he did absorb the pattern. By evening, the journalist's email arrived, crisp, professional, requesting an interview. He read it twice, then set it aside. He wasn't ready for that step. Not yet. Instead, he walked the length of his apartment, replaying the officer's smirk. The word uneducated. The assumption. The power. He felt anger rising not as heat, but as structure, clean, deliberate, directional. He returned to his desk, reopened the files, and continued organizing evidence. Nothing would be quiet. Nothing would be hidden. The narrative would not be theirs. The email subject line read simply, "Request for interview, urgent." Marcus opened it again, scanning the clean formatting, the journalist's name, Alana Merrick, and a concise description of her outlet's intention to document the incident, verify details, and examine systemic implications. No sensationalism. No bait. The message was clear. He closed his laptop and sat still, letting the question settle. Going public meant losing control of the narrative pace. But silence meant letting Trent's report calcify into institutional memory. His phone buzzed. Ruiz again. "Did you see the article on the student forum?" she asked. "No." Someone posted screenshots of the police report. "They are painting you as aggressive." Comments are piling up. "Expected," Marcus said. "Where did they get the report?" "Probably Trent leaked it." Marcus didn't waste time speculating. "I'm doing an interview." Ruiz exhaled. "All right. Then prepare thoroughly." He already had. They met at a quiet cafe 2 blocks off campus. Merrick arrived exactly on time, small recorder in hand, expression neutral but attentive. She greeted him with a short nod. "Professor Hale, thank you for agreeing." "Let's begin," he said. She pressed record. "Describe the initial moment. What did you notice first?" "The spotlight," Marcus answered. "The precision, the intention behind it." Her questions were direct, not fishing for sound bites but for clarity. Marcus recounted the sequence, the spotlight, the commands, the proximity, the wrist twist, the detainment. His voice remained steady, controlled. He didn't dramatize. He didn't soften. He didn't embellish. When he finished, Merrick asked. Do you believe the officer's actions were racially motivated? Marcus held still. Belief is irrelevant. The conduct speaks for itself. She nodded, understanding the weight behind the phrasing. Do you fear retaliation? Yes, he said, but silence is a greater threat. She clicked off the recorder. This will run tonight. I'll send you the transcript for accuracy. Good. As he stood, she added, prepare for backlash. Not from viewers, from institutions. I already am. The interview aired just after 7. Marcus watched from his living room, arms crossed. The segment opened with footage of the detainment, him standing under the spotlight, surrounded, stoic and still. Then cut to his statement at the cafe. Crisp audio, sharp clarity. I teach at the university. The officer dismissed that. He made his assumptions first, then shaped the interaction around them. The anchor's face tightened subtly. The segment ended with Merrick summarizing the department's refusal to comment. Within minutes, the video spread. His inbox filled with hundreds of messages. Students, alumni, strangers, activists, critics. He ignored all of them except one, an email from the university legal office. We strongly recommend that you cease all media engagement until internal reviews are complete. Public discussion may compromise your position. Marcus deleted it. Another message arrived immediately from the same office. Your continued refusal to comply may constitute insubordination. He drafted a single reply. My refusal constitutes truth. Then closed his laptop. Across town, Officer Trent slammed his fist on his kitchen counter as the segment replayed on TV. Lies, he muttered. All of it. His wife stood near the stove, arms folded, lips pressed tight. Maybe just stay quiet, Brent. This is... quiet. He jabbed a finger at the screen. He's destroying my reputation. Maybe your department should issue a statement. They will. The union will handle it. He grabbed his phone. This professor wants a fight? Fine. He typed rapidly into a group chat with fellow officers. Comments rolled in, some supportive, some hesitant, one warning him to calm down. Trent ignored the warning. He thinks he's better than us, Trent wrote. I'm not letting him rewrite this. He tossed the phone onto the counter, breathing hard. Marcus received the union statement less than 24 hours later. A mass-distributed press release. Officer Trent has an exemplary record. The accusations are unfounded, exaggerated, and harmful to community trust. Marcus studied each sentence, recognizing the coded pattern. Discredit the accuser, sanctify the officer, shift blame to the public. He printed the statement, slid it into a file labeled Institutional Responses, and returned to class preparation. Students trickled into his lecture hall before the seminar, whispering, watching him with a kind of charged silence. Marcus stood at the podium, adjusting notes, aware of every gaze. One student approached. Professor, we saw the interview. Thank you for speaking. Marcus nodded once. Take your seat. As class began, he maintained his usual tone. But after the discussion ended, several students remained. A graduate student, Layla, stepped forward. You don't have to go through this alone. Marcus looked at her. Yes, I do. She shook her head. We'll organize support, letters, statements, faculty petitions. Handle it outside class, he said. Don't let them claim I'm mobilizing students. Layla exchanged glances with others. They understood. When Marcus left the building that evening, his phone buzzed with a new number. The voicemail came through immediately. A gruff male voice. Drop the lies. You're stirring up trouble you can't control. He deleted the message. Another followed. Stay in your lane, Professor. Deleted. Then an email. Your interview was pathetic. You think you're untouchable because you have a title? Marcus shut the phone off. He sat in the driver's seat of his car, gripping the steering wheel, letting the quiet settle. Fear rose briefly, sharp, instinctive, but dissolved under the weight of something steadier. Conviction. He turned the phone back on and opened a new email tab addressed to Merrick. There are additional details I didn't mention. Records, dates, prior incidents involving officers on campus. Let me know when you can meet. He sent it. By the next morning, campus buzzed with escalating tension. Posters appeared on bulletin boards demanding transparency. Student groups issued statements. Faculty circulated an open letter condemning racial profiling. Marcus reviewed none of it. He focused only on hard evidence. But word traveled fast. Ruiz entered his office without knocking. "Marcus, Internal Affairs contacted me. They are opening a preliminary review of Trent because of your interview." Marcus didn't look up from his notes. "Good. They want to speak with you." "Fine. And the university is uncomfortable." "They should be." Ruiz hesitated. "You're changing the power dynamic. That scares them." Marcus capped his pen. "It should." That afternoon, Merrick responded. "Meeting tonight. Bring everything." Marcus gathered the files, videos, timestamps, documentation, the union statement, the false report, and placed them into one structured folder. He stepped outside into the cool air. The sky was turning a muted gray, heavy with approaching rain. The world around him humid normalcy, students laughing, cars passing, leaves scraping along pavement. But he walked with a different awareness now, one sharpened by truth, one unwilling to yield. Exposure had begun, and he knew the counterstrike was coming. The first sign of retaliation was subtle. A patrol cruiser parked across from Marcus's townhouse early in the morning, engine idling, windows dark. It didn't move for 22 minutes. Marcus timed it without stepping outside. When the car finally drove off, a second cruiser drifted by 10 minutes later, slow, deliberate, as if measuring the property line. He logged both occurrences, adding timestamps to his growing file. At noon, as Marcus began his lecture on judicial review, the classroom door opened. Officer Trent stepped inside wearing a campus safety badge clipped over his police uniform. He stood at the back, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Marcus. Students tensed. Whispering rippled through the room. Marcus continued lecturing without acknowledging him. After class, Trent approached with a forced smile. "Routine patrol. Just doing campus checks. Making sure everyone's safe." Marcus packed his briefcase. "Your presence inside my classroom is inappropriate." Trent leaned in slightly. "Only if you have something to hide." Marcus closed the briefcase, expression unmoved. "Leave." Trent's smile widened, brittle. "Careful, Professor. People are watching how you behave." "I count on it." Trent's jaw twitched before he stepped aside and left the room. Students gathered near the door after he exited. "Professor, that was harassment," Layla said. Marcus raised a hand. "Document it. Nothing more." They nodded. The second tactic arrived 2 days later. Marcus's graduate assistant, Jordan, texted him in panic. "Pulled over. No reason. They're asking about you." Marcus drove to the location immediately. When he arrived, Jordan sat on the curb while an officer rifled through his backpack. Marcus parked, stepped out, and spoke clearly. "Release him. Here's my assistant. This stop is unlawful." The officer didn't turn. "Stay back." Jordan looked up, eyes tight with fear. "They asked if you're coaching students to file complaints." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. "Who instructed you to ask that?" he said to the officer. The man straightened slowly. "We ask what's necessary." Marcus pulled his phone from his coat pocket and hit record. "This will not stand." The officer paused, then stepped back from Jordan. "We're done here." They returned to their cruiser and drove off. Jordan shakily rose. "Professor, what is happening?" "Systemic patterns," Marcus said. "You're not a target. You're an accessory to their pressure." Jordan nodded slowly, understanding far more than he wanted to. That evening, an email from the university struck with a weight of strategy. Subject: Notice of Professional Conduct Review. Marcus read the message twice. It cited concerns regarding faculty behavior escalating public controversy and potentially unprofessional engagement with media. He sat back, letting the hypocrisy crystallize. The institution that feared negative optics was now turning its scrutiny inward, toward him. He forwarded a message to Ruiz with the line, "They've chosen their posture." Within minutes, Ruiz appeared at his office door, face pale with anger. This is outrageous. It's predictable, Marcus replied. She shut the door. We need to respond strategically. No, he said. We need to confront them directly. He went to the administrative building at once. The meeting room smelled of coffee and antiseptic caution. Dean Lewiston sat with 3 administrators and campus council. They all wore the same expression, rehearsed neutrality. Lewiston motioned to a seat. Please sit, Marcus. He remained standing. Explain the charge. We're concerned, Lewiston said carefully, that your recent actions may reflect a lapse in professional judgment. Speaking truth is a lapse. Marcus asked. Counsel interjected. Your interview implied university complicity. I stated factual sequence. Another administrator clasped her hands. You're drawing attention that could damage our reputation. Marcus leaned forward. Your reputation is damaged because an officer profiled a faculty member. You are choosing to examine the response, not the harm. Lewiston sighed. We're asking for cooperation. That's all. No, Marcus said. You're asking for silence. Counsel shifted his posture. This review is procedural. You're not being punished. Then dismiss it. Silence. Lewiston cleared his throat. We can't. Marcus stepped closer to the table. I have the videos. I have the timestamps. I have the officer's false report, and I have documentation of subsequent harassment. Would you like those made public as well? Unease spread across their faces. Counsel finally spoke. We will pause a review pending further evaluation. Marcus nodded once and walked out. Later that night, he sat in his living room reviewing footage again. Each frame of Trent's harassment was a piece of a larger picture, one that would collapse the moment enough pressure was applied. Marcus wasn't chasing vindication. He was exposing structure. A sharp knock at the door broke his focus. He opened it to find no one, but a printed photo lay on the mat, an image of Marcus exiting the cafe after the interview. On the back, a scribbled line, "Stop before this gets worse." Marcus flipped the photo once, then placed it into his evidence folder. The next morning, Ruiz called with news. Some officers are distancing themselves from Trent. Internal Affairs interviewed several of them. Rumor is they think is unstable. He is. They won't say it outright, but they don't want him dragging the department down. Good, Marcus said. But be careful, she added. Cornered men take unpredictable actions. Marcus ended the call without comment. When evening came, he stepped outside to clear his thoughts. The campus was quiet, orange lights glowing along pathways. As he walked, he noticed a familiar silhouette across the parking lot, broad shoulders, rigid stance, uniform catching the low light. Trent. He stood leaning against a cruiser, arms folded, watching Marcus with a flat, unblinking stare. Marcus continued walking. Trent spoke without raising his voice. You think you're winning. Marcus stopped but didn't tone. I'm telling the truth. You're making a mistake. Marcus walked away. Trent didn't follow. But Marcus felt the threat settle into the air behind him like a closing door. That night, he added a new label to his evidence system, retaliatory conduct, ongoing. He typed a final note beneath it. Pattern is intensifying. Prepare for escalation. He closed the laptop. The retaliation phase was complete. The confrontation phase was about to begin. Marcus's phone vibrated while he packed the last of his lecture notes. The message preview read, Officer Trent is here. Parking structure. Late. He left his office without a word. The sky was dark, clouds low and heavy with rain. The campus parking structure loomed ahead, concrete and fluorescent lights casting long shadows. He entered, moving cautiously. The echo of his footsteps bounced off walls. Trent stood at the far end of the structure, arms crossed, cruiser parked to block the exit. The officer's uniform was impeccable, badge glinting in the harsh light. His smirk had a new sharpness, a predatory calculation. Marcus drew a breath. Officer Trent, he said, voice steady. Professor Hale, Trent replied, tone casual, but his eyes betrayed anger. I thought we could have a little chat. About the interview. Marcus raised his phone, activating the camera. Recording, he said simply. The red light blinked. Trent's smirk faltered slightly. You think this helps you? It helps the truth. The officer took a step forward. You're ruining my career, Professor. Making me look like... He stopped, gesturing vaguely, frustrated. You know what you're doing. You think your position protects you, but it doesn't. Marcus held the camera steady. I'm exposing misconduct. That's all. The law doesn't care about titles. Trent's voice sharpened. You think you can humiliate me and nothing will happen. Your actions already humiliate you, Marcus said. Your smirk, the unnecessary detainment, the flanking officers, all of it is documented. Trent clenched his fists. I don't care about documentation. I care about respect. Marcus took a measured step forward. Respect is earned through action, not intimidation. You failed. The officer lunged slightly, hand reaching. Marcus backed up, keeping his phone between them. Hands off, he warned. Footsteps echoed. Campus security appeared at the entrance ramp, alerted by earlier calls from witnesses. Trent's shoulders stiffened, realization flashing in his eyes. Marcus lowered the phone slightly but kept it recording. This is where it ends. Trent swallowed, lips tightening. You'll regret this. Perhaps, Marcus said, but I won't stop. Not until truth prevails. The first security officer stepped between them. Move along, sir. Trent stepped back, muttering, but glared at Marcus until he disappeared into the stairwell. Marcus exhaled, the adrenaline buzz in his chest, but he felt an odd calm. He had predicted escalation. He had anticipated confrontation. Each move was now on tape, undeniable. He returned to his car, parked on the upper level. The camera still recording. He spoke quietly, cataloging the interaction, noting exact time, distance, the officer's words, tone, posture. He paused the recording, knowing the footage could be used in formal proceedings. Later that evening, he sent copies to Merrick, the journalist, the university counsel, and his attorney. The file contained detailed annotations, timestamps, and cross-references to prior incidents. Marcus labeled it Breaking Point, Escalation Documentation. His phone buzzed again. Anonymous text, you think you're safe now? Marcus deleted it immediately. He made a mental note to record any further threats. By nightfall, Trent's colleagues had begun to discuss his conduct quietly. Marcus had overheard snippets in hallways, rumors of unease. Some officers were cautious, reluctant to be associated with his behavior. The shift was subtle but noticeable. Marcus returned to his apartment. He opened the file again, checking every timestamp and note. He plotted the next moves in the sequence: legal consultation, formal submission of evidence, coordination with the journalist, monitoring of administrative response. Each step precise, each step necessary. He reflected briefly on the emotional toll, tight chest, hypervigilance, the drain of constant attention to detail, but he also recognized resilience. He had anticipated retaliation and prepared accordingly. The next morning, a formal complaint arrived at the precinct, filed by Internal Affairs based on his recorded interaction in prior documented incidents. Trent would be officially investigated. Marcus reviewed the complaint, noting the language: deliberate, procedural, factual. No exaggeration, no embellishment. He made additional notes on Trent's prior conduct, cross-referenced videos, student statements, and administrative memos. Every piece became a bulletproof chain of evidence. He spent the remainder of the day in quiet preparation, drafting concise statements, arranging secure storage of digital files, and confirming copies were held off campus. Every precaution was tactical. By late evening, Marcus returned to the parking structure where the confrontation had occurred, standing in the same space under the fluorescent glare. He imagined Trent returning, angry, desperate, unrestrained. Marcus pictured his responses, measured, documented, immune to intimidation. He left the structure only when the lot was empty. No relief came, only recognition. The battle had escalated. Exposure was underway. The system would now respond. As he drove home, he reviewed the steps for filing formal complaints, legal filings, and media engagement. Each sequence lined up, calculated, unavoidable. He understood fully the cost of persistence: sleepless nights, heightened tension, scrutiny from colleagues and students, potential danger. Yet Marcus knew clarity outweighed fear. Documentation, evidence, and truth were now aligned. Trent's actions were recorded, undeniable, and publicly accessible. He parked, turned off the engine, and allowed the quiet to settle for a moment. The breaking point had been reached. The consequences were now in motion. Marcus sent a final note to his attorney, all evidence compiled. Retaliation documented. Proceed with formal filings immediately. He leaned back in his seat, muscles tense but mind steady. The confrontation had ended, not in victory, but in preparation. Tomorrow, Trent would face institutional scrutiny. Marcus exhaled slowly. Tonight, the record was complete. The morning after the parking structure incident, campus buzzed with a low, electric tension. Marcus arrived early, noting the unusual volume of foot traffic around the administration building. Students huddled near entrances, whispering, phones out. Faculty walked briskly, glances flicking toward him with careful neutrality. He ignored all of it, keeping his pace steady, mind focused on the task ahead, systematic documentation and legal reinforcement. Internal Affairs had opened a formal investigation into Officer Trent based on Marcus's recordings, the video from the cafe, and corroborating student reports. The department now faced undeniable scrutiny. Even before official notifications were delivered, word had spread through the precinct. The incident could no longer be dismissed. Marcus reviewed the submitted complaint on his tablet, noting the language: precise, factual, procedural. Every claim of misconduct was backed by time-stamped video, eyewitness accounts, and administrative correspondence. Trent's denial was now countered by multiple independent sources, leaving him exposed. At home, the phone buzzed constantly. A local journalist called to confirm timelines, ensuring facts aligned with Marcus's documentation. Another email came from the university legal office. Internal review now coordinated with campus safety and IA formal hearing pending. Marcus replied tersely, all prior evidence submitted. Any additional inquiry should be scheduled through council. By mid-afternoon, a small group of students gathered outside the precinct. Handwritten signs read, "Justice for faculty, no tolerance for profiling." Marcus observed from a distance, noting the coded solidarity and the measured tone. There was support, but also caution. Public pressure was mounting. Trent arrived at the precinct later that day, visibly tense. Colleagues whispered in hallways. Rumors of prior complaints resurfaced. Unexplained stops, questionable detainments, prior reports of aggressive behavior. IA officers interviewed witnesses, each statement reinforcing a pattern of bias and misconduct. Meanwhile, Marcus attended his scheduled seminar. He maintained controlled demeanor, teaching as usual, but every word carried weight beneath the surface. Students were attentive, some exchanging glances when he referenced legal accountability and institutional oversight. Each observation reinforced a lesson. Systemic power could be documented, challenged, and exposed. Later, Marcus met with his attorney. They reviewed the recordings, timestamps, and prior communications. "This is airtight," his attorney said. "We can use it to escalate formally, and it leaves Trent no room for plausible deniability." Marcus nodded. "We escalate carefully. Evidence first, exposure second. No missteps." The formal complaint was filed that evening. Internal Affairs confirmed receipt and scheduled an initial hearing. Marcus stayed in his apartment, reviewing the filing. Every frame of video, every timestamp, every student testimony was indexed and annotated. Redundancy ensured nothing could be dismissed as speculation or bias. The following day, Marcus received notification from multiple news outlets. The incident had gone viral. The cafe interview, Trent's parking structure confrontation, and campus videos were circulating widely. Comments and opinions proliferated, some supportive, some critical, others thinly veiled with coded hostility. Marcus ignored the commentary, focusing instead on the factual record. Campus administration convened a meeting with faculty. Dean Lewiston attempted to control the narrative, urging discretion and calm. Marcus remained silent, listening to their framing, noting their attempt to shift focus away from Trent's misconduct. Internal records, however, were unassailable. Trent, increasingly isolated within his department, began to react unpredictably. He called colleagues, expressing frustration at media coverage and internal affairs involvement. Some officers tried to counsel restraint, others distanced themselves. The lack of support eroded his confidence, amplifying his stress. By midweek, the IA preliminary review concluded. Sufficient evidence existed to proceed with formal disciplinary action. Trent was temporarily suspended, pending investigation. The news traveled quickly through campus and precinct alike. Students and faculty circulated messages of support for Marcus, acknowledging the courage required to confront systemic misconduct. Marcus took a measured approach to public response. He issued a short statement through his attorney, confirming the facts, emphasizing the investigative process, and acknowledging student support. He avoided sensationalism, focusing on systemic accountability rather than personal vindication. The university moved to review campus safety protocols, prompted by Marcus's evidence and media coverage. Policies regarding officer access to faculty areas, detainment procedures, and oversight of campus law enforcement were scrutinized. The administration could no longer ignore structural flaws exposed by one faculty member's documentation. By the end of the week, Trent's conduct had become the subject of national attention. Journalists referenced prior complaints and videos. Law enforcement unions scrambled to respond, attempting to shield him, but the mounting documentation undermined their efforts. Internal Affairs compiled a comprehensive report, now including multiple independent accounts of misconduct. Marcus reflected on the cost. The attention, the threats, the sleepless nights, all weighed heavily. Yet the outcome was clear. The system responded when confronted with meticulously documented evidence. Public pressure and procedural integrity aligned to produce accountability. Late one evening, Marcus returned to the parking structure. Empty now, fluorescent lights flickering. He traced the path of his confrontation with Trent, noting how small details, angles of cameras, positions of witnesses, timing of phone records, had shifted power from the unchecked officer to the documented truth. He understood fully the stakes. Truth demanded patience, precision, and persistence. Forceful intimidation could not overcome the methodical accumulation of evidence. Institutional pressure could be redirected when the record was indisputable. The consequences were unfolding. Trent faced suspension, investigation, and public exposure. Marcus, while drained, had established the conditions for systemic accountability. The balance of power had shifted, proving that careful documentation and strategic persistence could confront and disrupt patterns of abuse. By nightfall, the streets were quiet. Marcus walked home with measured steps, carrying the knowledge that the formal machinery was now engaged. Trent's actions were no longer private. They were now a public record. Each detail, each timestamp, each recorded moment fortified the accountability process. Marcus prepared for the next phase: legal review, public testimony, and continued monitoring. Consequences were underway. Justice had begun to assert itself, and Marcus's strategic foresight ensured that it would proceed through official channels, leaving no room for obfuscation or evasion. Weeks passed with methodical precision. Internal Affairs investigation continued, and Marcus monitored each step. Every document, every interview, every timeline was logged. The preliminary findings confirmed patterns that Trent had worked hard to conceal: prior complaints, unreported incidents, and repeated racial profiling. Campus administrators called a closed meeting with faculty. Dean Lewiston attempted controlled framing. The investigation is ongoing. Let's maintain calm. Marcus attended silently, documenting their posture, noting every evasive phrase. He recognized attempts to shift responsibility, but their window for controlling the narrative had closed. Trent's colleagues began distancing themselves overtly. Rumors circulated. Complaints previously buried were now being cited. Witnesses stepped forward, and officers who had once shielded him now questioned their own participation. Trent grew visibly isolated. Marcus received word from the University Council. Trent is now facing formal termination proceedings. The news was procedural, but it carried weight. The officer who had once wielded unchecked authority now confronted systemic consequences. That evening, Marcus returned to his office. He reviewed all evidence: videos, timestamps, student statements, media coverage, and prior reports. Everything was cross-referenced, layered, and airtight. His phone buzzed with messages from journalists seeking clarification, attorneys preparing for hearings, and student groups ready to provide testimony. At home, Marcus prepared his notes for the upcoming hearing. He outlined facts concisely, avoiding emotion, highlighting patterns of misconduct. The aim was clear: to present evidence without exaggeration, allowing the system to act unimpeded. Trent, aware of the impending proceedings, confronted Marcus outside the courthouse the following morning. His tone was hostile, demanding, edged with desperation. "You're going too far," Trent said. "Retract it all. Take it down." Marcus held eye contact, unflinching. "I will not retract the truth. You are accountable for your actions." Trent's jaw tightened. He gestured toward the media gathered at the entrance. "You're destroying a career." Marcus replied evenly. "You destroyed your own career the moment you chose misconduct over duty." Trent's shoulders slumped briefly. The weight of exposure, procedural scrutiny, and mounting public attention was undeniable. Inside the courthouse, Marcus testified before the hearing panel. Every word precise, every reference backed by documented evidence. His demeanor calm but firm. He detailed the incident, the escalation, the retaliatory conduct, and systemic implications. The panel listened, asking procedural questions, probing for inconsistencies. Marcus had none to offer. Outside, journalists documented his testimony. Cameras recorded. Audio captured every factual assertion. Social media circulated key moments in real time. The narrative no longer relied on hearsay. It rested on documented reality. Back on campus, students and faculty followed updates with tense anticipation. Email chains buzzed, discussion surged, and solidarity strengthened. Marcus remained focused on evidence and procedure, resisting the pull of emotion or symbolic gestures. The hearing concluded with the panel signaling their preliminary judgment. Sufficient evidence existed to recommend termination. Trent was formally dismissed, effective immediately. The notice circulated through the precinct and media channels, confirming institutional accountability. Marcus returned to campus the following week. Classes resumed under normal schedules, yet the air carried a subtle tension, an awareness of institutional power, its potential for misuse, and the consequence of rigorous documentation. He held office hours, meeting with students individually. Many asked questions, not only about legal process, but about personal safety, systemic bias, and the moral responsibility of witnesses. Marcus guided each discussion, drawing on his experience to teach not only law, but strategy, observation, and documentation. University leadership issued policy adjustments, prompted by Marcus's evidence. Stricter oversight of campus law enforcement, formal channels for reporting misconduct, and procedural reviews for officer conduct on campus property. The changes were procedural, but significant. They ensured that patterns of unchecked authority could be mitigated in the future. Trent attempted limited public statements, protesting the fairness of his dismissal. They were brief, defensive, and largely ignored by the press. The evidence against him was comprehensive. Attempts at denial failed to resonate because independent documentation and media reporting had already shaped public perception. Marcus met with legal counsel one final time to review the civil rights filing he had prepared. It referenced all incidents, documented misconduct, and outlined institutional and individual accountability. Counsel advised next steps, measured, legally sound, and focused on outcomes beyond personal revenge. In the lecture hall, Marcus addressed his students. Authority is rarely absolute. Observation, documentation, and precision create leverage. Accountability is not instant, but persistent. You cannot rely solely on conscience. Structure must enforce it. Students listened intently. The lesson was not only academic, it was lived. That evening, Marcus revisited the campus parking structure. Concrete walls, dim fluorescent lighting, echoes of prior confrontation. He walked deliberately along the same path Trent had once blocked. No officers stood in the shadows. The space was neutral now, recorded in memory and evidence. He paused, reflecting on the journey, confrontation, retaliation, escalation, exposure. Each step had been deliberate, each move documented. The system had responded, procedural mechanisms had functioned, and accountability had been enforced. Marcus returned to his office, Closing his laptop, the record was complete. Trent's career dismantled, the university compelled to act, systemic reforms underway. Justice was not symbolic. It was procedural, evidence-based, unavoidable. He allowed himself a quiet moment, understanding that clarity and resilience had carried the outcome. There was no triumph, only confirmation. Systemic abuse would be confronted and corrected when truth was persistent, structured, and undeniable. The reversal was complete. Authority had been checked. Misconduct faced consequence. And Marcus, while carrying the burden of vigilance and persistence, remained firmly positioned in truth. The campus was quieter than usual the morning after Trent's dismissal became public. Students and faculty whispered in hallways, checking phones for updates. Social media feeds were alive with discussion, links to the Internal Affairs report, and excerpts from Marcus's interviews. Marcus arrived early at his office, methodically reviewing emails and messages. Notifications ranged from media inquiries to student support notes. He ignored the tone of commentary, focusing solely on content and accuracy. Every report was cross-referenced against his evidence, ensuring consistency. The university issued a formal statement acknowledging Trent's termination, citing violations of protocol, abuse of authority, and documented misconduct. Policies regarding campus law enforcement access and oversight were updated and published online. Marcus read it carefully, noting the procedural language that reinforced systemic accountability without inflating narrative drama. Students began submitting written reflections and testimonies about witnessing the detainment incident and the subsequent retaliation. Marcus cataloged these submissions as part of a permanent record. He maintained a neutral tone in reviewing them, aware that each statement could be vital in potential civil proceedings or institutional review. Faculty meetings shifted from routine administrative matters to discussions of policy enforcement and monitoring procedures. Dean Lewiston attempted to frame these conversations around lessons learned and institutional reputation, but Marcus focused on practical applications, clear reporting channels, defined protocols, and procedural transparency. He met with Layla and Jordan to discuss student safety and documentation practices. Observation alone is insufficient, Marcus explained. Systemic oversight requires structured evidence. Dates, times, recordings, witness corroboration, every detail counts. Jordan nodded. We understand, Professor. This won't be ignored in the future. Yes, Marcus replied. It must never be ignored again. Media coverage continued. Reports highlighted not only Trent's actions but the pattern of prior misconduct, the administrative response, and Marcus's documentation. Journalists referenced the precise timelines, video footage, and corroborating student statements, all verified independently. Public discussion shifted toward structural accountability, not individual character judgments. Marcus received a call from his attorney. The preliminary civil rights review is ready. They recommend formal filing. Evidence is strong. Timing is favorable. Proceed, Marcus instructed. Ensure all documentation is preserved. Redundant backups off campus. Maintain chain of custody. The attorney confirmed. Marcus noted the procedural rigor, redundancy, verification, legal sufficiency. He understood that systemic correction relied on structure, not sentiment. Evening brought quiet reflection. Marcus walked across the quad, observing students returning from classes. Their faces showed tentative relief, awareness of institutional change, yet still residual wariness. He understood the psychological cost. Trust and authority had been tested, and some wounds were invisible. In his office, Marcus reviewed the entire series of events: initial detainment, false reports, retaliation, media exposure, institutional review, and Trent's dismissal. Each stage was documented meticulously. The outcome demonstrated that sustained evidence, procedural patience, and strategic disclosure produced tangible accountability. He received an unexpected email from one of Trent's former colleagues, anonymous, expressing concern over his behavior and acknowledgement of previous incidents that had gone unreported. Marcus filed it alongside other evidence, maintaining objectivity. Each additional data point reinforced the system's capacity to self-correct when documentation was thorough and accessible. The university held a formal debriefing for campus safety staff. Procedures were revised, oversight strengthened, and reporting mechanisms clarified. Officers were trained to recognize bias and misconduct patterns, emphasizing preventative measures. Marcus attended only as an observer, noting compliance and areas for further improvement. He spent late nights drafting a guide for students and faculty on documenting systemic misconduct. It outlined procedures for evidence collection, witness statements, legal consultation, and institutional reporting. Precision, accuracy, and procedural integrity were emphasized. Marcus's focus was not symbolic. It was functional, methodical, and preventative. Weeks later, civil rights filings were formally submitted. Each document was cross-referenced, time-stamped, and duplicated. Media coverage acknowledged the thoroughness and legality of the submission, reinforcing systemic transparency. Marcus observed all activity without distraction, noting patterns rather than sentiment. Trent's appeal attempts were minimal and ineffective. Public exposure, administrative documentation, and independent evidence rendered denial implausible. Procedural mechanisms ensured enforcement, temporary suspension, formal dismissal, and institutional acknowledgement of misconduct. Marcus returned to teaching, seminars, and research. Class discussions included elements of legal accountability, systemic oversight, and procedural methods required to confront power abuses. Students engaged actively, referencing their experiences, observations, and reflections on institutional responsibility. He met briefly with Dean Lewiston, whose demeanor had shifted from defensive to neutral compliance. Procedural corrections were implemented, and further scrutiny was unavoidable. Marcus maintained his focus on factual accountability, ensuring that institutional power was exercised transparently and fairly. One evening, Marcus revisited his parking structure. The space was empty, illuminated by flickering fluorescent lights. He walked the same path Trent had once blocked. The confrontation now existed only in memory, documentation, and evidence files. The system had responded. Misconduct had been addressed. Authority had been corrected. He returned home, noting the residual fatigue from sustained vigilance. Yet he also recognized resilience, careful observation, rigorous documentation, and procedural adherence had achieved measurable results. The aftermath was neither dramatic nor sensational. There were no public celebrations, no triumphalist gestures, only methodical accountability, structural correction, and continued vigilance. Marcus understood that systemic change required persistence, evidence, and unwavering procedural integrity. By nightfall, the records were archived, backup secured, and evidence catalogued. Marcus reviewed final notes, ensuring all documentation was complete and redundancies in place. The narrative of misconduct had been corrected through methodical strategy, not impulsive action. For the first time since the initial incident, Marcus allowed himself a quiet exhale. The system had acted. Retaliation had been contained. Institutional accountability had been enforced. The aftermath was steady, precise, and procedural, a reflection of the work required to confront abuse and enforce justice within complex structures. The record was clear. Authority had been checked. Patterns of misconduct had been interrupted. Marcus turned off his desk light, closing the laptop. The work was complete, but vigilance remained. Systemic correction required ongoing attention. Misconduct would always attempt resurgence, and truth demanded preparation. He sat quietly, understanding fully. Justice had been executed not through spectacle, but through disciplined, unwavering method. The formal hearing results arrived on a crisp Thursday morning. Marcus opened the official notification with careful attention. Internal Affairs concluded the investigation, confirmed patterns of misconduct, and recommended permanent termination for Officer Trent. The decision was final, procedural, and unambiguous. Campus notifications were distributed. Students and faculty received clear statements. Misconduct had been verified, disciplinary action enforced, and policies revised to prevent recurrence. Marcus reviewed the communications, noting precise language and factual framing. The documents emphasized accountability over emotion, ensuring the outcome was structural rather than performative. Trent attempted one final appeal through union channels. The legal submission was meticulous but ultimately ineffective. His prior record, the documented evidence, and procedural adherence ensured enforcement. The appeal failed, and his termination was upheld without delay. Marcus continued to monitor the institutional changes. Campus safety policies were formally updated. Strict oversight on officer access, mandatory reporting protocols, and external auditing procedures. Compliance training was implemented, emphasizing recognition of bias, misconduct patterns, and documentation standards. Students remained vigilant. Marcus led a seminar on systemic accountability, demonstrating evidence collection, documentation, and reporting. He emphasized precision, neutrality, and legal adherence over rhetoric or symbolism. Truth is procedural, he stated plainly. Without structure, it is ignored. Faculty and staff gradually aligned with these protocols. The administration's posture shifted from defensive to compliant. Dean Lewiston issued an internal memo encouraging transparency, clear reporting, and adherence to procedural oversight. Marcus maintained a neutral presence throughout. There was no celebration, no vindictive gesture, no public triumph. The resolution was functional, misconduct addressed, authority corrected, systemic safeguard reinforced. He understood fully that emotional satisfaction was irrelevant. Structural correction was a true measure of success. Media coverage continued, but tone shifted. Reports highlighted procedural enforcement, legal adherence, and institutional accountability. Public discussion acknowledged that while the personal story was compelling, the systemic adjustments were the core achievement. Marcus noted every article, ensuring that records were accurate in reference for ongoing oversight. He held a private meeting with legal counsel. The filings are complete, redundant copies secured. Internal policies now reflect accountability measures. Anything further is maintenance, not reaction. Marcus also met with students and staff who had contributed documentation. He instructed them on proper archiving, timestamp verification, and procedural safeguards. The aim was preventative, ensure that future misconduct could be addressed without reliance on ad hoc action. For Marcus, the resolution was methodical. Trent's career had ended. The university was compelled to act, and structural changes were enforced. No dramatics were required. Everything rested on documented evidence, procedural adherence, and systemic oversight. Late afternoon, Marcus returned to his office. He reviewed all files once more, video recordings, timestamps, student statements, administrative memos, and media coverage. Everything was cataloged, cross-referenced, and archived in multiple secure locations. The record was complete, unambiguous, and legally defensible. He reflected on the personal cost, fatigue, hypervigilance, ongoing scrutiny. Yet he recognized that the process had reaffirmed the principles he valued: precision, resilience, and structural accountability. Emotional response was subordinate to documentation, method, and systemic integrity. Campus life returned to its normal rhythm, though with heightened awareness. Students and faculty now understood the importance of procedural rigor, systematic observation, and documented accountability. Marcus incorporated these lessons into lectures and seminars, reinforcing that authority unchecked invites abuse, and systemic correction requires evidence-based vigilance. Trent's absence was noted quietly but visibly. Former colleagues adjusted routines. Students who had felt threatened now attended classes with measured confidence. Campus administration maintained the updated safety protocols, acknowledging that vigilance required ongoing enforcement. Marcus continued monitoring developments. Any attempt by Trent or affiliates to contest findings or obstruct institutional reforms was documented, timestamped, and filed. He maintained professional detachment. Every record was procedural, every action recorded, every chain of evidence secured. He visited the parking structure one last time. Empty, quiet, the fluorescent lights flickering softly. He retraced the path of confrontation, mentally noting angles, distances, and witness vantage points. The space, once a site of intimidation, was neutral again, its past tension neutralized through documentation and systemic enforcement. Marcus returned to campus. Students approached cautiously, offering gratitude framed in observation and professionalism rather than emotion. Marcus nodded, acknowledging the shared understanding of procedural accountability. At his office, he drafted a final internal report summarizing events, institutional responses, and systemic adjustments. The report was concise, precise, and factual. No embellishments, no dramatization. Every procedural step was logged, every incident cross-referenced, every safeguard noted. By evening, Marcus archived the report. The cycle of confrontation, retaliation, exposure, and resolution was complete. Misconduct had been corrected. Authority had been checked. Systemic adjustments were in place. The evidence was immutable, the procedures enforceable, and the accountability structural. He sat quietly at his desk, reflecting not on victory or vindication, but on functional correction. Emotional satisfaction was irrelevant. Structural integrity had been restored. Authority misuse had been curtailed. And the campus, and those within it, were now better equipped to prevent repetition. Marcus turned off his desk light. The system had responded. Misconduct had faced consequence. Vigilance remained necessary, but the resolution was procedural, complete, and immutable. The weeks following Trent's termination were steady, procedural, and devoid of spectacle. Campus life continued, but with measured vigilance. Marcus returned fully to his academic routine, lectures, research, and mentoring students in law and ethics. His focus was methodical, emphasizing systemic observation and procedural accountability over rhetoric or emotion. He reviewed all evidence one last time: videos, timestamps, student statements, administrative correspondence, and media coverage. Each item was cross-referenced, redundantly archived, and secured off-site. The record was immutable, legally defensible, and complete. There was no need for dramatization. Documentation alone had produced accountability. Students continued to seek guidance. Many asked questions about legal procedures, documentation methods, and navigating institutional structures. Marcus responded systematically: observation, evidence, reporting, and procedural adherence. Emotional interpretation was minimized. Accuracy, precision, and clarity were paramount. Campus safety policies were now fully implemented. Officers received training on bias recognition, misconduct reporting, and transparency. Oversight mechanisms were formalized. Dean Lewiston's administrative memos reinforced structural enforcement, ensuring accountability and reducing discretionary abuse of power. Marcus monitored compliance. Periodic audits, formal reporting structures, and documented incident logs maintained procedural integrity. Misconduct could no longer operate unchecked. The system itself had adapted to prevent recurrence. Media coverage subsided gradually. Articles continued to reference the case, highlighting evidence-based accountability and systemic correction. Public discussion shifted from sensationalism to institutional responsibility, policy reform, and procedural rigor. Marcus observed these developments, noting patterns and ensuring factual accuracy without engaging in commentary. Legal counsel confirmed that civil rights filings were properly submitted and fully documented. The formal case was now in motion, supported by an airtight collection of evidence. Marcus had ensured that all steps adhered to legal and procedural standards. He met with students who had contributed documentation, ensuring that they understood proper archiving, verification of timestamps, and institutional reporting channels. Marcus emphasized clarity, neutrality, and procedural adherence. Lessons were structural, methodical observation, redundant evidence, and systematic documentation. One afternoon, Marcus walked through the quad, noting students moving between buildings, discussing assignments, and observing campus life. There was a quiet awareness among them, a subtle understanding of institutional accountability, evidence collection, and the importance of procedural vigilance. He returned to his office and reviewed correspondence from media outlets, legal counsel, and university administration. Every thread was organized, cataloged, and archived. Marcus maintained detachment. The emphasis was on functional accuracy rather than sentiment or recognition. In the evening, Marcus revisited the parking structure where prior confrontations had occurred. Empty and silent, it reflected the neutral space now restored through procedural enforcement. He traced the route of his previous confrontation, mentally verifying distances, sight lines, and witness vantage points. The space was now documented and secured as evidence of accountability, not tension. He drafted a final procedural report summarizing initial misconduct and racial profiling by Trent, retaliatory actions and harassment, documentation and media exposure, institutional response, investigation, and procedural enforcement. policy reforms and preventive measures. The report was factual, concise, and complete. No embellishments, no emotional interpretation, only the systemic chain of events, evidence, and corrections. Marcus sent copies to legal counsel, university administration, and secure archives. Redundant backups were stored off-site. Every chain of custody was verified. The record could withstand scrutiny indefinitely. Students continued to reference the case in discussions, seminars, and academic work. Marcus reinforced that the lesson was structural, evidence-based accountability, procedural vigilance, and methodical enforcement. Authority misuse was curtailed not by emotion, but by documentation and systemic correction. Late evening, Marcus returned to his apartment. He reviewed the final evidence folder one last time. Video files, timestamps, statements, memos, all organized, redundant, and secure. The confrontation, retaliation, and resolution were fully recorded. Misconduct had faced procedural consequence. Authority had been corrected. The system had responded. He allowed himself a brief moment to reflect, noting the absence of spectacle, drama, or personal triumph. The outcome was structural, methodical, and permanent. Vigilance remained necessary, but the framework for accountability was established. Marcus turned off his laptop and prepared for the next day. Classes, seminars, and legal oversight would continue. The precedent had been set. Systematic abuse would not go unchecked, and documentation, precision, and procedural adherence were the tools for enforcement. As he sat quietly, he recognized the cost: fatigue, hypervigilance, and ongoing scrutiny. Yet he also understood the enduring impact: structural correction, preventive mechanisms, and institutional reform. Emotional response was irrelevant. Systemic integrity had been restored. The case was closed, not as a narrative of vengeance, but as a demonstration of accountability, procedural rigor, and structural reform. Misconduct was corrected. Authority was checked. The campus and its community were better equipped to prevent repetition. Marcus finally exhaled. Documentation complete. Evidence secured. Procedures enforced. The systemic arc had reached closure. Vigilance remained, but the foundation for enduring accountability was now immutable.